Let's get this sports podcast party started, all right?
The JAYREELZ podcast.
You're not going to get any NFL to start off this podcast. And yes, everybody knows how much I'm a huge Met fan. And with the news coming out last night as far as Juan Soto, and you know that's where I'm beginning. There is so much to unpack, not only with him, this process, and this signing, but even now everything after that. As we now take a big, deep, giant breath. I know for those who root for the blue and orange, and for those who rock the navy blue with the pinstripes, I know that they are crying in their Cheerios this morning, and I'm going to get to all of it. So, for starters, $765 million, 15 years. Am I a happy Met fan this morning? I guess you could say that, but here's the thing. There's so much to uncover here when it comes to what this team is going to do and what this team now has to really set their sights on. So yes, we could talk about the contract and how exorbitant it is and how it's just completely outrageous, something that we thought we would never see after what we witnessed last year with Shohei Ohtani. And even he's not worth $700 million, despite the fact that he's not only a DH, but he also pitches, which a lot of people are going to look forward to seeing this year, barring everything is on track and on schedule for him to toe the rubber as a starting pitcher for the LA Dodgers. But for Soto to get this type of money, and I understand a couple of years ago where the Nationals said here's 15 for $440 million, and he even thumbed his nose at that, which we thought was preposterous because we said, wait a minute, I understand he's going to wait till he gets to his free agency year, but you're going to pass up on $445 million, which was more than what Mike Trout got as a member of the LA Angels when he signed, 12 for, I think, $436. So even at that point, we thought that Juan Soto was out of his gourd. But when you have Scott Boras as your agent and a guy that you know is going to get every last red cent from an organization and an owner, in this particular case, Steve Cohen and the Mets, that here it is, the richest contract in the history of professional sports. And this is only going to go to a guy that, as we all know, as dominant and as proficient of a hitter that we've ever seen. Now, is he Ted Williams? He is not. He only batted .288 last year, so this isn't a guy that's going to bat .330, .340, .350, although in the pandemic year he did hit .351, small sample size, but we know what he brings as far as his plate discipline, as far as that Soto shuffle, now going from the Bronx to Queens, as far as a guy who has as keen of an eye as we've seen since Barry Bonds, dating back to the latter part of the 1990s into the 2000s. And now that we have Soto in the mix there in Flushing under this just mind-boggling contract, despite the fact that he's not a good outfielder, not a good base runner, and you would think that you're going to give $765 million to a five-tool player. And when you think about it, he's probably a tool player where he could hit for average and hit for power. Mind you, the .288 average this year. But now this is where it all gets kind of crazy when we look at the big picture here for the Mets. Forget about the money because, as everybody's going to say, well, it's not my money. Yeah, it's not your money until you go to the ballpark because then that's what you're going to spend through the nose and out of your rear end when it comes to parking, concessions, tickets, etc. But for this very moment, when we look at this team and having your right fielder in tow for 5 years where he could opt out, and if he does opt out, the Mets could actually make the contract from $765 to $800 million because he will get a $4 million raise throughout the rest of the contract. After that, he's getting $51 million a year on average throughout the course of the contract. But again, his salary will go up. You have to break down the parameters. This is all on average, people. But if he does opt out, and for whatever the reason happens to come back in to the remainder of the contract, he will get in upwards of $55 million a year throughout the remainder of the final 10 years of what he signed for there, I believe last night, or maybe in the coming days when he'll go out to Citi Field to have the press conference, pomp and circumstance, etc. So now that you have your right fielder in place, how does the rest of this team unfold? we understand he means a lot to this organization because he is your face. I understand Francisco Lindor is probably going to be your heart and soul, maybe blood and guts, but when you're going to look at the yearbook and the media guide, his face is going to be front and center with Lindor flanking to the left or right of that. You don't pay a guy that amount of money in order for him just to be an afterthought or just to be a Robin to Lindor's Batman. And when you think about the numbers of this contract, he's getting paid more than $400 million more than Aaron Judge did, his former teammate, when he signed his deal 2 years ago. And Judge had an MVP season because Soto was in the lineup. So now that I segue into that lineup, is Soto going to be the guy that's going to carry this team? Soto, we know, has the power, he has the pop, but he's a guy that would, I don't want to say rather take a walk, but he's a guy that would try to draw a walk and hand a baton as opposed to a guy that says, all right, get on my shoulders, get on my back, I'm going to carry you through a stretch of the season or let's say through a postseason to where he's going to be the man. And who knows how that Lindor-Soto relationship is going to be. I would think Lindor, he probably endorsed this once Steve Cohen got on the phone via text, or I would think by FaceTime, or maybe even in person for that matter, to say, hey, this is what we're going to do. And I'm sure Lindor signed off on it. And Lindor, you would think he's going to be that team guy. He's not going to put the ego at the door. He's going to put the ego at the door. He's going to check that to make sure that you're going to bring in a huge chip like Soto to your team who is going to garner a lot of attention and a lot of pressure. And we'll get to that when we get to spring training. But we know that with the contract and everything that is going to be discussed from now until his first plate appearance at Citi Field next year, or even when they're on the road to start, it is going to be a spotlight unlike we've ever seen. But I would think that even with Soto, a guy that, I don't want to say he deflects pressure or a guy that is going to be impervious to that, but you have to think, knowing that he's going from one side of town to the other, a town that has not won a World Series and going on 39 years, that all of the focus is going to be just pretty much in his locker, his position, his everything. Every move he makes in the city is going to be microscopic and scrutinized to the point where, not to say he's going to do anything crazy off the field, but we know that with the money and with the expectations is going to come that pressure. Without question. But I understand that's a discussion as we get for spring training. But when I try to take this 30,000 foot view of this signing and what it means, and now as I transition to this lineup, because I don't know if Soto's going to be that guy where he's going to put up those prodigious numbers. And of course he's going to hit 30 and 100, you would think. But he isn't an automatic in a regard where this lineup with Lindor and even with Vientos, a young player who I would think a lot is going to be expected on him to deliver based on what he did in the regular season and obviously had that monster postseason. But what's going to happen at first base if Pete Alonso, is he going to come back considering the amount of money that was spent here? Now, factor in this. The Met payroll was freed up $179 million this past offseason or these past couple of months, based on the contracts that were signed by Max Scherzer and Justin Verlander and a few others along the way. But now you've already tied $80 million of the $179, and would you still think about it, have $100 million to play with if you're going to be anywhere in that $340 million stratosphere as the Met payroll was heading into last year, but with a lot of that money coming off the books, and now that you have 51 for Soto, 17 for Frankie Montas, although he has an opt-out after this year, and then Clay Holmes, who I'll get to in a little bit, signs a 3-year, $38 million, which you figure is going to be about 12 and a half. That's 80 right there. Where's the rest of this money going to go when you need starting pitching and more of it, not Montas or Clay Holmes, who's going to be transitioned to a starter? So that is a big, giant question mark. You still have big guys out there. I don't know if they're going to go for the Corbin Burnses or the Max Frieds. I don't know if that's going to happen. To me, and I said this before and I'll say it one last time, if I'm Steve Cohen, see what Walker Buehler wants. And I know he's going to want a big payday, and obviously he has a long history injury as well, but I'd rather take him considering that He has guts. He has heart. We saw what he did in the World Series and even in the playoffs against the Mets, 4 innings. And yes, he had to battle throughout those 4 innings in order to get to a point where they were in good stead for the Dodgers to win that Game 4. But all I got to say is this. Do whatever it takes to bring him in here, because at least you're bringing a guy who knows what it takes to win, especially a guy who's going to be a part of your rotation. Soto, we know, is a guy who won in Washington, and he had big players along the way, whether your name is Anthony Rendon or even a guy like Ryan Zimmerman, who was, I understand, long in the tooth in his Nationals career at that point. And even in San Diego, where Soto played with Machado and Tatis Jr., and we know with the Yankees with Judge and Stanton. But now that when we get to this lineup, yes, you do have Lindor, yes, you have Vientos, but where else are they going to get another bat that's going to complement not only this lineup, but even Soto to get protection around the aforementioned shortstop and possibly first baseman by way of third base and Vientos. So they're going to need another at bat here. They're going to need another bona fide slugger in order to complement, to have any length in this lineup in order for the Mets to go to places where they haven't seen in quite some time. And I'm talking about going to and winning a World Series, not getting to the playoffs, not having a little run where you got to a championship series last year, which was unexpected, but now get to the dance and win it. So how's this lineup going to be put together here in light of this contract? And as well as the rotation and as well as the relief pitching, because as we saw, the relief pitching fell apart in October. The Phil Matons of the world. Guys like that we had to get from other places, but did not deliver in big spots. And the Reed Garretts, and I can go on down the list, the Jose Butos. Yes, we need to get that bullpen somehow, some way replenished. So you have that to deal with. So how I look at it is, am I happy with the signing? I guess you could say yes, but there's a lot of work to do. Bringing Soto in doesn't mean that there's going to be a championship parade up the Canyon of Heroes come next October up Broadway. I'm not satisfied as a Met fan. Is it a nice present under the tree, an early present? Absolutely, but one more time. Steve Cohen, David Stearns, you guys are still on the clock. It is not time to pop the champagne. It is not time to celebrate by any means necessary. The work has begun. And now you have to deliver here over the course of these next few weeks with the winter meetings in tow to see whether or not you could stabilize that rotation, upgrade that bullpen, and certainly see if Pete Alonso is going to be a guy that you're going to want to bring back, or another slugger out there that you're going to try to bring onto the team. You need a center fielder. Starling Marte is going to be gone. You may have to trade Jeff McNeil. There's still so much that needs to be done here. And yes, we could throw in Francisco Alvarez as far as a bat in the lineup, but you need more than that. If Alonso comes back, you would say, all right, great. Now we have a lineup. But until then, what is it going to be? So this signing was enormous by any stretch, but by any means, it is not time to put your feet up, Met fans, and think that everything is kaput, over and out. Now let me get to the Yankees, because I'm sure the Yankee fan today, they got to be sick. They also have to feel as if this doesn't happen to us. We never get outbid for a free agent. And then to the Mets of all teams. So you know the Mets are going to be major players, because that's what Steve Cohen had said upon him buying the team and him officially being the owner, that he was going to make these type of moves. And yes, we saw it a few years ago with Scherzer, Verlander, etc. And now he got the biggest fish out there. And for the Yankees, they have no ifs, ands, buts, maybes about to hang their heads here. Are they disappointed? Absolutely. Because the offer that's been reported that they put forth, 16 years and $760 million, to me, that's as good as it gets. And I'll be honest with you, I'm actually surprised Soto did not take that offer for this reason. All right, they gave him the extra year, a little bit less money, $5 million, big whoop. But you would think that, considering the camaraderie that he had with Judge and knowing that they just came off of a World Series appearance, and you would think from Just Juan Soto. Forget about Scott Boras. And we know Boras, come on, $5 million. You won last year. Yankees said, no, we'll give you one more year, but $5 million less. And I'm surprised that he said, you know what, I'm going to take the offer in Queens instead. Only because he knows what it's like to be in that Yankee locker room. He knows what it's like to be in pinstripes. And I'm sure he's been told about the history. The Mets, you don't have that. There is no comparison between the Met organization and the Yankee, or as far as the franchises go. Granted that the Yankees had a 60-year head start, but still, when you're talking about tradition, when you're talking about history, the Yankees slaughter everybody. That includes the Dodgers, that includes the Cardinals, that includes the Cubs, Red Sox, etc. But for whatever the reason, he said, the hell with it. I'm going to take the money. And if you're a Yankee fan today, I know you can't wait for those games in Yankee Stadium so you could boo the hell out of Juan Soto. And you know what? You have every right to. Because it's not as if the Yankees put up a $650 million offer or their ceiling was at $700 where you could say, come on, $700 and the Mets went $765. You're going to skimp out here, blah, blah, blah. Yankee fans can't do that. Not this day, not this year, not this time. So they have every right to be angry. I'm sure they're like, good riddance. It's not my money. I don't have to worry about that. But now as you're Brian Cashman and Hal Steinbrenner, what are you going to do to not only rebuild your team, but build it to a point where you get younger, get more athletic, because you can't bring aging players onto this team. You're trying to get rid of those players. Soto was that guy, that young player that he is, but he's not really athletic, and we understand he's not a great fielder. So I'm sure maybe there's a little bit of relief in their regard, maybe not to the fan base to a certain extent, because the fan base can't be angry at their front office, but from the standpoint that they lost out, us, the Yankees, on getting the big free agent that the Yankees never seem to lose out on. And as a Met fan, I'm not trying to stick it to the Yankee fan. For what? I know that the back and forth, the sports fodder that it is to have a star like Soto go from the Yankees to the Mets, which we've never seen. And yes, it's easy to needle the Yankee fan today, but I'm not going to do that. Why? Because the Met fan needs to worry about their team. They can't worry about the Yankees. And I've never worried about the Yankees, nor their fans, unless they end up winning a World Series. As we all know, another winter I can sleep in peace. But for that, how I look at it is that the Yankees did what they had to do to try to keep Soto, and they should be walking with their heads held high this morning. And let's see how Cashman and company are going to put this team together. And that's the other fascinating thing about this. I understand it has nothing to do with the Mets, but considering I live in New York and what the plan B is for the Yankees here is going to be beyond intriguing. Because who are they going to bring in, whether via free agency or by trade? We know that Torres is gone. Who knows if they're going to cut bait on DJ LeMahieu? Obviously, Judge goes back to right field. Is Dominguez going to be your full-time center fielder? What's going to happen in the left? I guess Verdugo, I believe he's a free agent. Maybe they're going to put Spencer Jones out there, two rookies to start out your two-thirds of your outfield. Who knows? They need a first baseman, no Rizzo. They need a left-handed bat in the worst way, even though Jazz Chisholm is that guy. But with Rizzo gone and obviously with Soto from one borough to the next, they need a left-handed bat in the worst way. So that's why, from that perspective, the Yankee offseason has now been ratcheted up even 10 times more because of Soto walking out the door. And all I can say is this, as someone who loves baseball and has watched the sport forever, and knowing that there's been that back and forth between the two organizations, especially their fan base, more so in the last year than ever, and now it's going to be at a fever pitch because it is almost going to be personal between these fan bases once we get through this period here of free agency, once we get to spring training and all the attention that Soto's going to generate between that, and who knows what the press conference is going to be, because you already know there's going to be a lot that's going to be said about Soto, thought process, etc. Did you think about the Yankee fan? Did you think about the organ? All that. And let's see how he answers that. But we may have And even though that hasn't really been a rivalry, yes, it's been big brother, little brother, but now it's almost at an even keel because of what has happened here over the last 12 hours or so, depending on when you're listening to this, of course. So let's see. This, again, has so many different storylines, so many different angles, and how this is going to play out is going to be fascinating. But the Mets, they got their man. And now they have to put forth the rest of this roster in order for them to get to a level where they're going to win a World Series. Because right now, just bringing Soto aboard or on board, and even with Clay Holmes and Frankie Montas, you think that's enough? Not this Met fan.